Alright, I'm ready to pop one of these exhaust valves out. And I have to get a hammer. Sometimes the keepers stick a little bit. That's all it takes to break it loose, just a quick pop. A lot of carbon on here, although it's not really horrible. Not as bad as I've seen. I'll show you what I'm going to do for the valves. I'm going to go to a different valve.
This is Majestic Jukebox Radio, your favorite music station, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Real easy to lose these keepers. So I always keep some extra ones on hand because I do lose them. Drop them on the floor and you never can find them again. Retainer cap fell. These are single springs. I'm going to use doubles. I'll go back with them. Yeah, there's not very much carbon on there at all. It's perfectly usable. Stem seals. I expect them to be hard as rock. They only have them on the intakes here. Alright, let's take a look at some other interesting things. Let me clear the deck here. I'll move the camera here so we can look inside. Not horrible. Definitely got some buildup on the exhaust valves, but again, not too bad. Now let's take a look at something else. Look down in the ports. Guess I'll have to get some lights so we can see down in there. Alright. One thing you'll notice is that, try and get things set up here. The intake port is Siamese, which means that both intake valves are fed off the same port. Exhaust ports, the outside ones are not. There it is. However, the inside one is. So that affects how it performs by far. If you think about it for a second, what's going to happen? The firing order on this is 1342. So cylinder 3 gets charged from the intake and the valve closes. All the air that's going in there has to stop, and then of course number 4 opens, so it has to reverse and go down into number 4. The same thing happens on 1 and 2, and that makes for an inefficient combination. That's why cross-flow heads and heads with 4 valves per cylinder and things like that. None of the modern heads do that. But, you know, they had a very small area to work with here. So I guess that's why they chose. Of course, this basic design goes back to the late 30s. So, yeah, not exactly modern technology here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and clean it up with the wire brush a little bit before I go any further. All right, I have cleaned up one of the chambers there, and I wire brushed off all the nasty stuff off the surface anyway. And here, for comparison, is a cylinder head that's already had some work done, and I'm going to point out some of the differences as best I can. I'm sorry the camera work is so jiggly; it's hard to hold it and do this. All right, so probably the best thing to notice is right here, the amount of how the combustion chamber wall is in relation to the valve. It's straight up and down. And if you look at this one, you'll see that it's been eased out a little bit, and it also leans back a little bit. It's been particularly eased back here around the exhaust valve. That's called unshrouding the valve. If you think for a minute about how the exhaust is going to get out of the combustion chamber, it is under pressure, so it's being pushed, but the more access, so to speak, that you can give it to the valve, then the easier it's going to flow out. These are the valves that I'm getting ready to use in comparison to the originals. You'll notice that they're a bit bigger, 2 millimeters each. Also, this is the guide I'm going to use, and the cool thing about it is that it's tapered where it goes into the combustion chamber, which again allows more flow around the valve. In addition, if you look at this intake valve, you'll see how it's necked down right around the bottom part there, and that's the part that's down in the port, and that allows the exhaust gases to move and intake gases to move past it better. Here's a standard one for comparison. You can see it's not necked down at all. So these are high performance valves, and they'll give us a little more go, a little more horsepower by the time it's all done. I'm going to set the camera down for a second so I can turn these heads over and I can show you a couple things. Alright, I think it's pretty obvious that the ports have been enlarged. You look at this exhaust port right here and compare the shape of it to that one, and you can also just make out an outline around this port here, and that's where the exhaust would have the exhaust manifold or header in this case attaches there, and you could see that it could be opened up quite a bit in order to match that and make the flow move that much smoother. It doesn't really matter as much on the exhaust side because the exhaust gases are under pressure, and you probably can't see very well down into the port itself, but everything's been smoothed and flowed so that it will. Let me get the flashlight again. Boy, that doesn't help. Okay. It's been flowed and smoothed. Now, one thing you don't want to do, if you look down in these ports, you'll see that they're not smooth. They actually have some texture to them, and that's because if you polish them and make them smooth like the combustion chambers are, then you'll find that the fuel tends to drop out of the mixture and attaches itself to the walls, and that screws with your mixture, and then you don't get good combustion. So you can polish the heck out of the combustion chamber itself, because that doesn't matter, but you want those ports to have a nice kind of a texture to them so that it won't separate the gasoline droplets out of the airstream. Let's see what else. Set this down again for a second. And if you notice, these springs are double springs instead of singles that are in this one. So these are higher performance. So they won't float at higher RPMs. They'll close the valve more positively. But of course, that's more pressure against your camshaft, and that actually takes away a little tiny bit of horsepower to drive those. Plus, they wear the cam out quicker. Now, we're not talking, in 5,000 miles or anything like that. We're just talking about over the long haul. But since none of our cars get driven all that many miles anymore per year, it's not really an issue. Alright, so that's cylinder heads. Alright, I'm going to talk about a couple other things. When it comes to unshrouding the valves, as you can see, you have to be a little bit careful because the fire ring, as they call it, the thing that actually seals the head gasket to the head, there's not a whole lot of room, especially down there on that intake valve. So you can unshroud it to a degree, but you have to be careful what you do. A couple other things, normally speaking, so what I usually do is I take the head gasket, lay it down on top, and then I go ahead and mark out with a marking pen or a scribe just exactly how far I can go. And that way when I'm starting to carve on it a little bit, I make sure I don't go any further than I absolutely can so that I don't wind up cutting into the fire ring area. I was a little concerned about this cylinder head about right here in the center where the gasket looked like it might have been blown, but it looks okay. I'm going to have the head shaved anyway to get a nice good flat surface so it'll hold the gasket no matter what. And you can look down in, let me get some light, in that exhaust port right there, and you can see there is a ton of carbon down in that one. It's going to be real interesting to get it out. The intakes are nice and clean, but the exhausts definitely have carbon buildup in them. And for those that don't know, that carbon buildup is caused by leaded fuel. So this car definitely ran some miles in Europe. Look at this last one here. You can see the carbon is filled all the way around the valve guide in a kind of a round, I don't know, chunk. That's going to be fun to get out. And I'm going to have to chip that out with a cold chisel probably. I cleaned up all the valves just to see what they were like, and they're actually in really good shape. There's really nothing wrong with them. They cleaned up nice. I marked them. I don't know if I'm going to reuse them or not. I may go with the bigger ones. I haven't decided yet. If I do go with the bigger ones, I have to get different caps and different keepers because, as you notice, these have 1 and these have 3. So that takes a different keeper and a different cap as well. So still undecided about doing that, but definitely going to do some work in the ports, definitely going to do some cleanup work, and we'll see what happens.